But only 4 years after the death of his mother, John was about to lose another person he loved. After a brief trip back to Liverpool, he returned to Hamburg in April 1962, where he was told that Stuart had suddenly died of a massive brain hemorrhage.
When Stuart died, I think it hit John very badly, and I think he probably reacted in the same way as he did when his mother died. In other words, he pretended it hadn't happened, or he made little jokes about it, because he probably wouldn't have wanted anybody to see how upset he was. I know he didn't come to the funeral, but I could imagine John not have wanted to go to it because it would have been too emotional. And that's sad. You're not able to show your emotions.
On another trip home, in the summer of '62, John's emotions were about to be tested by yet another crisis.
I'm pregnant. John comes back from Hamburg and I have to break the news. And he said immediately, "Oh, we're going to have to get married then, aren't we? I'll have to tell Mimi." Yes, so he went home and told Mimi, who immediately went mad with John.
Mimi said to John, "You don't have to marry her, John." And in fact, Cynthia's mother also said, Mrs. Powell also said, "You don't have to get married, Cynthia." So on both sides they were offered the chance in those days not to have the shotgun wedding, and John was firm. "I want to marry her. I am going to marry her." And of course he did.
In the early months of their marriage, Cynthia moved in with John at Aunt Mimi's house in Menlove Avenue.
Well, it ain't changed much, apart from the greenery. It's where John used to practice his guitar, in the porch, for the acoustics.
In April of 1963, John's son Julian was born.
That was our bedroom. So I used to push Julian out of his pram and put him here and underneath the trees.
'Cause baby, it's you.
There is a photograph of John holding Julian, but it's the only one.
Most of the first months of Julian's life, John was away working. By the time he finally returned to Liverpool, the Beatles were a very different band.
It was a learning experience because we went out there, we were raw. I wouldn't turn around and say novices, but we were new to our trade. You know, we were the young apprentices. And we came back skilled masters, which basically took Liverpool by storm.
I saw a girl in my dream.
The real legend of the Beatles now begins, as they started to play regularly at a dingy cellar club that was about to become world famous, the Cavern.
It was the Beatles who made the Cavern, not the Cavern who made the Beatles. It was Hamburg who made the Beatles, because when they came back they were unknown. They'd only been playing at a few venues, so much that the girls used to say to Paul McCartney, "You speak very good English for a German band." And of course Paul could speak a bit of German. He egged them on.
The Cavern was owned and run by a professional rival of Alan Williams, so the Beatles' success there put them on a collision course with their manager.
I don't feel as though I'd lost them. In actual fact, I was annoyed with them. And so I wrote them this letter. "You appear to be getting more than a little swelled-headed now. Remember, when nobody else wanted to know you, I took you on board. And I said, you would have never got to Germany if it hadn't been for me. And I'll fix it that you'll never, ever work again."
Didn't quite work, did it?
No, it was me that never worked again.
Hello, little girl. Hello, little girl.
John was enjoying himself, and he was enjoying his independence from all the middle-class values he'd been brought up with.
You every day, I say.
There was this aura around John. But again, playing with him on stage, you saw another side of him. You saw the talent that he had. His manner on stage and his mannerisms on stage were great. John was the one who really went crazy. I mean, John was the one who was like jumping off the piano, doing his Rudolf Nureyev splits, and, you know, ripping his jeans every night.
When the Beatles started, well, he was first playing in the Cavern in Liverpool, as you know, and I'd be visiting, I was going to the Cavern, and Mimi found out that he was playing in this dreadful water streaming out of a cellar, and he said, "Stanley, I believe he's playing in this dirty, filthy cellar. Take me down to the city and show me where he is." And I said, "Oh, he's all right, Mimi. He's happy. I want to see this." But so I had to take her down to the Cavern, and my God, oh my God, get him out, he's not playing, get him home. I said, "Leave him alone, Maze. Oh, leave him, he's happy. Well, he can stay here tonight, but he's not coming back here again." Oh, she hit the roof.
You're my little girl, oh yeah, you're my little girl.
A new man, and eventually a new manager, had just entered John's life. Brian Epstein, who ran a record shop in his parents' Liverpool furniture store, visited the Cavern and was bowled over by the Beatles.
Brian was immediately caught up in it and offered to be their manager. Brian was a lovely person. His dream was not to be running a record shop in Liverpool. I mean, Alan was one kind of manager, but Brian was posh. And he obviously had money, and he obviously dressed beautifully, and he had class.
Brian also had the kind of discipline and decisiveness that had been missing from John's musical life, even if John didn't always enjoy it.
Brian Epstein had such great faith in the Beatles that people laughed at him when he said the Beatles would become bigger than Elvis. But what he did was basically change the group from John's group to Paul's group, and this caused a big shift in their relationship. Now, John loved his leathers. He loved the black leathers. He didn't want to shed them. He loved the rough R&B. He loved the way they performed. And Epstein wanted to smooth them out with the mohair suits. Epstein took them to the Empire Theatre to see the Shadows, who came on stage in dicky bows. And at the end of their act, they bowed. And Epstein said, "That's what you must do. You must do things like that and bow at the end of your act. This is how you must be." John hated it, and Paul thought that is correct, that is how things should be done.
But Brian Epstein was a homosexual, and there are those who claim his interest in John was more than professional.
Brian may have had, you know, a great longing, great desire for John. I know a lot of people have come up, and there's always the infamous story about him spending nights with him and all this type of stuff. It never happened while I was there, so I can't really comment on it, to be quite honest.
Certainly Brian did express a sexual interest in Pete.
There was one particular occasion when Brian propositioned me, the answer was no. And John was in the car, and he basically sort of, when we stopped for a drink further down the road, came up and said, "You know, what was all that about?" So I just turned around and said, "Well, the gaffers just, you know, propositioned me to spend the night with him, you know." And he started laughing. He said, "You're joking, aren't you?" So I said, "No." So he said, "What did you say?" So I said, "No." "What the bloody hell do you think I said?" So I just went, "Oh."
The manager's name is Brian Epstein. Now, I'm terribly sorry he can't take any calls right now. He's waiting for a call.
By now, Brian was close to securing a recording contract for John and the band. But before the ink was put to the paper, Pete Best was sacked and replaced with Ringo Starr. John got Brian Epstein to do the dirty work. He never spoke to Pete about it.
The thing about John was, though, even though you may, you know, have been angry with him for a split second, you could never keep that anger, you know. It would be gone. You couldn't retain it, because that was the type of person he was.
The recording contract gave John his first ever UK record, and with their next release, the Beatles topped the British charts for the first time, with a song written by John Lennon. Under the firm guiding hand of Brian Epstein, they were on their way to becoming the most famous rock and roll band in the world.